Have you ever wondered which European countries are on the brink of collapse in 2025? You might think of major economies like Germany, the UK, or Ukraine. But what if the real answer is somewhere unexpected? Across the continent dealing with political chaos, economic disasters, and social unrest that are pushing these nations toward the edge, threatening their stability like never before. From skyrocketing inflation to failing governments, these nations are facing crises that could change Europe forever. Some are struggling with debt, others with mass emigration, and a few are even dealing with civil unrest. Will these countries recover, or are they heading toward disaster? You might be surprised at who makes the list. Stick around as we count down the fastest collapsing European nations. And trust me, you won't believe which country takes the #1 spot. So grab your popcorn and let's dive into the unraveling of Europe's most unstable states. Who's next on the edge? Let's find out. Number 10. Germany. Germany has long been Europe's economic powerhouse, but things are changing. Could the country be heading toward an economic and social crisis? First, Germany's population is aging rapidly. By 2035, nearly 40% of Germans will be over 50, meaning fewer workers, labor shortages, and major economic strain. The workforce is shrinking, but the number of retirees is growing. Who's going to keep the economy running? Then there's Germany's heavy reliance on exports, especially to China and Russia. But with the Ukraine war and growing tensions between China and the West, Germany's trade partnerships are at risk. If exports slow down, so will the economy. And let's not forget the energy crisis. Germany was heavily dependent on Russian natural gas. But after the war, supply cuts caused energy prices to skyrocket by 50% in just 1 year. This has hit both businesses and households hard, making everything more expensive. Speaking of rising costs, inflation hit 7.2% in 2023, making everyday life more expensive than ever. Wages aren't keeping up, and people are struggling to afford basic necessities. Even Germany's youth are feeling the effects. Nearly 10% of young Germans are unemployed, which is a big warning sign for future economic stability. If Germany can't fix its labor shortages, energy crisis, and economic struggles, the country could be heading toward protests, economic decline, and rising social unrest by 2025. Number 9. Italy. Italy, home to stunning architecture, world-class cuisine, and a rich history. But beneath the beauty, the country is facing serious economic and political challenges that could lead to disaster by 2025. Italy's national debt hit a staggering $3 trillion in 2023. That's 135% of its GDP. The government is struggling to pay the interest on this massive debt, leaving fewer resources for healthcare, education, and infrastructure. But debt isn't Italy's only problem. The country's population is aging rapidly, and by 2025, it will be one of the oldest in the world. With fewer young people working and paying taxes, the economy could slow down even further. And to make things worse, Italy has one of the lowest birth rates in Europe, at just 1.3 children per woman, meaning the workforce is shrinking fast. And what about jobs? 30% of young Italians are unemployed, leaving many feeling hopeless about their future. With fewer opportunities in manufacturing and a struggling tourism industry, Italy's economy is standing on shaky ground. If Italy doesn't take urgent action, it could be heading for a financial meltdown and political instability in the coming years. Number 8. France. France, one of Europe's most powerful nations, is facing a crisis that could change everything. With massive debt, rising prices, political chaos, and social unrest, the country is heading toward an uncertain future. The French economy is struggling. The country's public debt has soared to 115% of GDP 2023, limiting government spending on essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. At the same time, inflation hit 5.6%, making everyday life more expensive for millions of people. Wages aren't keeping up, and frustration is growing. But the crisis doesn't stop there. France is in the middle of a political storm. In 2023 alone, over 300 protests broke out across the country. People are furious over pension reforms, government corruption, and an economy that seems to be failing them. Cities like Paris have become hotspots of unrest, and the tension is only getting worse. Young people are feeling the impact the hardest. Youth unemployment is at 20%, leaving many without job prospects or hope for the future. A lost generation is emerging, frustrated and disillusioned with the system. On top of that, climate change is making things worse, with extreme weather damaging agriculture and infrastructure, adding another layer of instability. With all these problems piling up, France could be heading toward a major economic and political collapse by 2025. Will the country find a way out, or is it on the path to disaster? Number 7. Poland. Poland has been one of Europe's fastest growing economies, but could that growth be at risk? In recent years, Poland has faced increasing political and economic challenges that could push the country toward a crisis by 2025. The government, led by the Law and Justice (PiS) party, has been accused of undermining democracy with controversial judicial and media reforms. This has created major tensions with the European Union, which has threatened to cut off crucial funding. Poland has received over 70 billion euros from the EU's recovery fund, but if relations worsen, that support could disappear, leaving the economy vulnerable. Poland's economy depends heavily on exports, but with a global economic slowdown looming, its impressive 4.9% GDP growth rate in 2023 may not last. A downturn in trade could hit Poland hard, especially with rising income inequality and youth unemployment at 10%, leaving many young people without stable job opportunities. On top of this, Poland is under immense pressure from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, as millions of refugees have sought shelter in the country. While Poland has shown strong support for Ukraine, the financial and social strain is growing, adding to political instability. If these issues aren't addressed, Poland could face a serious economic downturn and political crisis by 2025. Could Poland's rapid rise turn into a sharp decline? Number 6. Ukraine. Ukraine is facing one of the toughest battles in modern history, not just on the front lines, but in its economy, politics, and daily life. The war with Russia has devastated the country, causing its GDP to shrink by over 30% in 2022 alone. Millions of Ukrainians have fled, and entire cities have been reduced to rubble. Roads, bridges, and power plants have been destroyed, making everyday life incredibly difficult for those who remain. Right now, Ukraine is heavily dependent on foreign aid, with over $50 billion coming from the US, EU, and other Western allies. But here's the problem. This support isn't guaranteed forever. If international funding slows down, Ukraine could face a financial disaster. The country's public debt has already surpassed 80% of GDP, and rebuilding the economy will require hundreds of billions of dollars. Another major concern is Ukraine's energy sector. With power plants bombed and the grid in crisis, electricity shortages are a growing problem. On top of that, political instability and corruption continue to make recovery even harder. Even with global support, Ukraine's leadership struggles to control the situation. So what does the future hold? If the war continues or Ukraine fails to rebuild effectively, the country could be heading toward economic collapse by 2025. Number 5. Spain. Spain, a country known for its rich history, beautiful beaches, and vibrant culture, is facing serious challenges that could push it toward economic and political turmoil. While Spain has shown resilience over the years, cracks are beginning to appear, and if things don't improve, a major crisis could be on the horizon by 2025. One of Spain's biggest problems is youth unemployment, which has skyrocketed to 40%, one of the highest rates in Europe. Imagine nearly half of young people unable to find work. This is fueling frustration, protests, and social unrest, making it harder for the country to move forward. Another major issue is Spain's reliance on tourism. The pandemic dealt a devastating blow to this industry, and while 2023 saw some recovery, it's still far from pre-pandemic levels. A weak tourism sector means fewer jobs and less money flowing into the economy. At the same time, Spain's public debt has ballooned to 120% of GDP, forcing the government to make tough decisions. Years of austerity measures have left many people struggling, and with the cost of living rising, families are finding it harder to afford even basic necessities. Political instability is another ticking time bomb. Catalonia's push for independence remains a major source of tension, with frequent protests and clashes between regional leaders and the central government. If these issues aren't addressed, Spain could face a severe political crisis, further damaging its economy. If things continue down this path, could Spain be on the verge of collapse by 2025? Number 4. Greece. Greece, a country known for its breathtaking islands, rich history, and ancient ruins, is facing an uncertain future. While millions of tourists visit each year, Greece's economy is in serious trouble and could be on the brink of collapse by 2025. One of the biggest issues is debt. Greece owes more than 180% of its GDP, one of the highest debt levels in Europe. Even after years of bailouts from the European Union and the International Monetary Fund, the country is still struggling to recover. The economy is barely growing. In 2023, Greece's GDP growth was just above 1%, much lower than many of its European neighbors. Meanwhile, youth unemployment is stuck at 30%, forcing many young Greeks to leave the country in search of jobs elsewhere. This brain drain is making things even worse. Then there's the housing crisis. Rents and home prices are rising fast, and more than 40% of Greek households are spending over 30% of their income on housing. Combined with stagnant wages, many families are struggling just to make ends meet. With rising social unrest, protests, and a struggling government, Greece is in a tough spot. Its public sector remains bloated, infrastructure is outdated, and the economy is too dependent on tourism to stay afloat. If Greece can't reduce its debt, create jobs, and fix its economy, a major financial collapse could be just around the corner. Number 3. Hungary. Hungary, a country known for its stunning architecture, rich history, and deep cultural roots, is now facing serious economic and political challenges that could put its future at risk. But what exactly is happening, and why are experts warning of a potential crisis in 2025? Swingy Hungary's relationship with the European Union is crumbling. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's policies, which critics say undermine democracy, have led the EU to freeze funding. Since Hungary relies heavily on EU money, losing financial support could push its economy into deeper trouble. Then there's the economy itself, which is slowing down fast. In 2023, Hungary's GDP growth was only 1.5%, far behind its neighbors. Inflation is still sky-high at 10%, making life more expensive while wages remain stagnant. For everyday Hungarians, affording basic necessities is becoming harder. But the problems don't stop there. Youth unemployment is rising, with 15% of young people unable to find work. At the same time, Hungary's population is shrinking, with a birth rate below 1.5 children per woman. That means fewer workers in the future, adding even more pressure to an already struggling economy. With foreign investors growing hesitant, an aging workforce, and political instability, Hungary's future looks uncertain. If these issues aren't addressed soon, 2025 could bring serious economic stagnation or even a collapse. Number 2. Netherlands. The Netherlands has long been seen as one of Europe's most stable and prosperous countries. But beneath the surface, cracks are beginning to show, and if things don't change soon, the Dutch economy could face serious trouble by 2025. First, inflation has soared past 6%, pushing up the cost of living while wages struggle to keep pace. Everyday necessities like food, energy, and rent are becoming more expensive, leaving many Dutch citizens frustrated. But the real crisis lies in housing. Over 200,000 people are stuck on waiting lists for affordable homes, especially in major cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam. With skyrocketing rent and home prices, inequality is growing and protests are on the rise. At the same time, the government is facing mounting pressure from the European Union to reduce carbon emissions. This means tougher regulations on industries like agriculture and transport, potentially leading to job losses and economic slowdown. With a mix of rising living costs, political unrest, and economic uncertainty, the Netherlands may be heading toward a period of instability. Could this trigger an economic downturn? Will the Dutch government find a solution before it's too late? Number 1. United Kingdom. The United Kingdom was once seen as a global economic and political powerhouse, but today, cracks are forming that could lead to a major crisis. The economic fallout from Brexit is still hitting hard. GDP growth has slowed, and public debt has surged past 100% of GDP, leaving the country in a fragile state. On top of that, inflation reached a 40-year high in 2023, with skyrocketing energy prices and food costs, making life increasingly unaffordable. The Bank of England has raised interest rates, making mortgages more expensive and pushing many households into deeper debt. But it's not just the economy that's struggling. The UK is also facing serious political instability. With multiple leadership changes in recent years, the government is deeply divided, and Parliament is stuck in gridlock. Meanwhile, growing frustration over austerity measures, cuts to public services, and the cost of living crisis has sparked mass protests across the country. Adding to these challenges is an aging population. By 2025, nearly 1/4 of the UK's population will be over 65. This means fewer workers, rising pension costs, and even slower economic growth. If the UK fails to fix its economic instability, manage rising inequality, and resolve its political divides, the country could face a deep economic downturn and widespread social unrest by 2025. And there you have it, 10 European countries that could be on the brink of collapse. From economic struggles to political instability, these nations are facing serious challenges that could change Europe as we know it. What do you think? Do you agree with our list, or did we miss any countries? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching.